Mongols swept across Asia, mighty empires and kingdoms, such as the Song Dynasty and the Delhi Sultanate, either crumbled or surrendered under their relentless military force. Asian nations fought valiantly, employing massive armies, fortified defenses, and strategic ingenuity, yet few could halt the advance of this unstoppable juggernaut. However, glimmers of resistance did emerge. The Japanese, for example, were shielded by the legendary divine wind, the Kamikaze, while the Mamluks at Ain Jalut proved that even the fiercest storm could be weathered. But what about Europe? Could the fragmented feudal kingdoms and heavily armored knights of the West stand against a foe as swift and brutal as the Mongols? While Asian defenders relied on familiar terrain and traditional tactics, Europe faced an entirely alien challenge. An enemy whose methods defied everything they had encountered before. In this exploration, we will uncover how European armies used everything from castle defenses to battlefield tactics in their attempts to confront the Mongols. Before diving into the Mongols' devastating incursions into Europe, we must first step back and examine their early, crucial encounters with European states. In the early 13th century, the Mongol Empire, led by Genghis Khan, was in a period of rapid expansion. After conquering vast territories in East Asia, including China, Central Asia, and parts of the Khwarezmian Empire, the Mongols turned their sights westward toward the Eastern Rus principalities. For the Mongols, these lands were not just a borderland but also a crucial gateway to Europe. In 1222, Genghis Khan dispatched two of his most trusted generals, Subutai and Jebe, on a reconnaissance mission into these territories. Their orders were to scout the region and assess its strength. Along the way, they encountered the nomadic Cuman and Kipchak tribes living on the steppes. Alarmed by the Mongols' presence, the Cumans and Kipchaks sought help from neighboring principalities. Among these, Kiev played a key role in forming a coalition to confront the Mongols. In the spring of 1223, Subutai and Jebe led their forces to the Kalka River, where they faced the combined armies of several Rus' principalities and the Cuman tribes. Despite the size of the coalition, the Mongols' superior tactics and discipline proved decisive. The Cuman forces were shattered, and the Rus' army suffered a catastrophic defeat, losing an estimated 50,000 men. In contrast, Mongol casualties were minimal. The Battle of Kalka was a watershed moment, marking the Mongols' first significant appearance in Europe. After their victory, Subutai withdrew eastward, but the Mongols left behind a network of spies in Rus territories. These agents continuously reported on local affairs, laying the groundwork for future campaigns. Armed with intelligence and strategic foresight, Subutai returned in 1237 alongside Batu Khan, leading a massive force of around 120,000 troops. This marked the beginning of a full-scale Mongol invasion of the Rus' lands. The campaign was brutal and efficient. Over the next 3 years, the Mongols systematically destroyed the major Rus' principalities, including Kiev. By 1240, the Mongols had effectively subdued Kievan Rus. Following the destruction of the Rus' states, the Mongols expanded their reach. Subutai and Batu sent spies and scouts deep into Poland, Hungary, and even as far as Austria. These reconnaissance missions were part of their meticulous planning for a grand assault on Central Europe. In 1241, the Mongols launched a 5-pronged invasion. Kaidu and Orda Khan devastated northern Poland, Baidar ravaged southern Poland, Shiban crossed the rugged terrain of northeastern Hungary, while Subutai and Batu led the central invasion into Hungary. At the same time, Guyuk advanced south through Transylvania. This division of forces was a calculated strategy, designed to confuse the Europeans about the Mongols' ultimate objectives and to defeat individual armies before they could unite into a central force. Meanwhile, Mongol forces pushed into eastern parts of the Holy Roman Empire and Austria, spreading panic across the region. In August 1241, Pope Gregory IX passed away, leaving a power vacuum in the Catholic Church at a time when Europe faced the looming Mongol threat. To deal with this crisis, King Bela IV of Hungary desperately appealed to Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor, for assistance. The son of the Holy Roman Emperor was appealed to for help. However, Frederick, who had long-standing disputes with Bela, as Bela had sided with the Pope against him, refused to commit to a major military expedition. Declining to cross into Hungary, Frederick instead focused on rallying support within Germany to prepare for the Mongol invasion. He vowed to protect the empire on his side of the Alps, yet his efforts to unite the German princes and kings failed spectacularly, devolving into civil war in Germany by the fall of 1241. At the beginning of 1242, the Mongol army continued their large-scale pillaging during their withdrawal from Hungary. Their raids extended into the Balkans, posing a significant threat to Constantinople, which at the time was under the control of the Latin Empire. As they retreated, Batu deployed additional forces into Galicia-Volhynia, further destabilizing the region. By spring, the Mongols were still plundering the areas they passed through, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. Batu eventually halted his forces, not returning to Mongolia, but instead settling on the Volga steppe. From there, he established a strategic base, maintaining a constant threat to Europe in the west. Meanwhile, Europe remained fractured and unprepared for a unified response. The Holy Roman Empire and other kingdoms were entangled in internal conflicts. To make matters worse, the Saintonge War erupted between France and England, diverting attention and resources away from the Mongol threat. Organizing a crusade against the Mongol Empire proved nearly impossible. Despite Emperor Frederick II's repeated calls for unity and his letters urging England and France, the two strongest powers in Europe at the time, to take action, no significant effort was made to prepare for another Mongol invasion. Europe remained vulnerable, with no clear strategy to counter the looming danger. For those on the front lines of a potential Mongol return, such as Bela IV, King of Hungary, the situation in the fall of 1242 was far from reassuring. Within just a few years, the infamous Mongol invasions had scarred Europe in ways that seemed impossible to heal. The numbers alone painted a devastating picture. When the Mongols swept through Kievan Rus, Hungary, and Poland, it is estimated that 5 to 10 million people were killed within just 2 decades. Major cities were nearly wiped off the map, with populations declining by 80 to 90%. Take Kiev, for example. Once a bustling hub of culture and trade with around 50,000 inhabitants before the invasion, it was reduced to only a few hundred survivors, most of whom had fled before the Mongols attacked. In Poland, the destruction was just as catastrophic. The Mongols razed over 70% of major settlements, including cities like Krakow and Sandomierz. Poland's population dropped by 30 to 40%, and many areas were abandoned for decades. The regions touched by the Mongol horde often became dead zones, unable to recover even after the fighting stopped. The toll on Eastern Europe's land was staggering. An estimated 30 to 50% of arable land was destroyed or rendered unusable due to the invasions. Roads, bridges, and critical infrastructure were obliterated, grinding trade to a halt. Local economies took anywhere from 50 to 100 years to recover, and some areas never regained their pre-invasion prosperity. Hungary, however, bore the brunt of the devastation, leaving a haunting legacy that echoed across Europe. The Battle of Mohi became infamous as one of the worst military defeats in Hungarian history. Around 50% of Hungary's population, approximately 1 million people, were killed or enslaved. Rural areas were particularly hard hit, with 40 to 50% of villages completely burned to the ground. Agricultural production came to a standstill for years, triggering widespread famine and a prolonged economic crisis. The destruction extended beyond numbers. The Mongols did not simply decimate armies, they dismantled entire societies. The psychological scars were immense, as survivors faced not only physical ruin, but also the constant fear of another invasion. That is why King Bela IV, upon his return to Hungary, immediately set out to rebuild his shattered kingdom. Bela IV was convinced that the Mongols would not simply withdraw and spare Europe. His suspicions were reinforced throughout his reign, as he frequently received threatening letters from the Mongols demanding his submission. The first step Bela took to prepare for future invasions was to build more fortified stone castles. During the Mongol rampage, he had noticed that while much of Hungary lay in ruins, the 5 stone castles east of the Danube had miraculously survived. Meanwhile, wooden and earthen fortresses were easily destroyed by Mongol siege weapons. At that time, Hungary possessed only about 10 stone castles, most of them concentrated near the Austrian border, where much of the population had fled during the invasion. To improve his kingdom's defenses, Bela ordered and encouraged the nobility to construct additional stone fortresses, particularly in rugged, hard-to-reach areas west of the Danube. By the end of his reign, Bela had overseen the construction of nearly 100 new fortresses, a remarkable increase aimed at protecting Hungary from future attacks. Previously, Hungary had relied primarily on wooden castles and light cavalry. This strategy, however, had proven ineffective against the Mongol army. Hungary's light cavalry had struggled, while the few heavily armored knights, mostly from the Templar order, performed much better in close combat. Recognizing this, Bela saw the need for a stronger, more modern military force. In response, he created a new corps of heavily armored knights, modeled after those in Western Europe. In 1247, Bela struck a deal with the Knights of St. John, granting them land in southeastern Hungary in exchange for their assistance in building more armored cavalry units and fortifications. This marked a significant shift in strategy. By combining stronger fortifications with a restructured military, Bela prepared his kingdom for the possibility of another Mongol invasion, a threat that loomed for years to come. 2 years later, small and medium landowners who served directly under the king were recognized as nobles. New settlers were also granted conditional noble status if they agreed to fight as armored cavalry when needed. This reform significantly strengthened Hungary's military. In fact, one envoy of King Charles I of Anjou reported enthusiastically, "The Hungarian royal house has incredible power. Its military forces are so large that nobody in the east or the north dares even budge. If the triumphant and glorious king mobilizes his army, most of the countries and princes of the north and east belong to his empire, by kinship or by conquest." By 1259, King Bela IV reached out to the Pope, seeking assistance in negotiating with Venice to hire at least 1,000 crossbowmen. Venice, known for its long-standing military tradition, was particularly renowned for its naval power and the effective deployment of crossbow troops. In addition, Venetian infantry excelled in both land and sea battles. Bela likely understood that Venice could provide well-trained soldiers, an essential boost to Hungary's defenses against future invasions. This initiative reflected Bela's broader effort to modernize Hungary's military capabilities in response to threats from formidable enemies like the Mongols. The decision to turn to Venice for crossbowmen was especially strategic. The weapon had proven highly effective in past confrontations with the Mongols, even though Hungary had not widely adopted it during the first invasion. Bela's foresight demonstrated his determination to learn from past mistakes and ensure his kingdom would be better prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Alongside his military reforms, Bela also pursued an ambitious diplomatic strategy. One of his key moves was bringing the Cumans back into his kingdom. These Turkic nomads had once sought refuge in Hungary, but had abandoned him for the Mongols after their leader was assassinated. To win them back, Bela offered land and marriage alliances. His son married a Cuman princess, and the Cumans were granted a portion of the great Hungarian plain, devastated by the Mongols, in the hope that they would now serve as a first line of defense if the invaders returned. Another major strategy involved forging a network of marriage alliances with the Polish dukes, the Dukes of Bavaria, the princes of Galicia-Volhynia, and various Rus' princes who had fled to Hungary. Through these alliances, Bela sought to weave a defensive web of kinship and loyalty, ensuring Hungary would not face future threats alone. In the case of Galicia-Volhynia, Bela IV encouraged its ruler, Danilo Romanovich, to assert independence from the Mongols as King of Ruthenia, creating a convenient buffer state between Hungary and the Mongol Empire. Beyond these alliances, Bela maintained regular contact with the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor, seeking support in the form of money, troops, or any resources they could provide. Initially, Bela received backing from Pope Innocent IV, who had taken 2 years to be elected following the death of Celestine IV, the successor to Gregory IX. Pope Innocent IV soon convened the Council of Lions, an event that brought together hundreds of clergy from across Europe to address the major issues facing the Church and the continent, including the Mongol threat. Recognizing the urgent need to better understand this formidable enemy, the Pope commissioned several diplomatic missions. The most notable envoy was Giovanni da Pian del Carpine. At the age of 65, Carpine embarked on a grueling journey to Karakorum, the Mongol Empire's capital, and eventually returned with letters from the Great Khan addressed to the Pope and European monarchs, demanding their submission to Mongol rule. Carpine's mission was remarkable, not only for the immense distance and dangers he faced, but also for the wealth of information he gathered throughout his travels. He meticulously observed, took notes, and interviewed anyone who could provide insights, particularly European prisoners who had survived Mongol invasions and knew their strategies well. Thanks to his efforts, Carpine compiled a detailed book that offered specific guidelines on how to counter the Mongol army. Most of his recommendations involved adopting elements of Mongol military organization. For example, scouts needed to be on constant alert, day and night. Armies should be organized using the Turkic-Mongol decimal structure to allow easier command. Troops had to advance and retreat together, strictly following orders and avoiding splitting into small groups that could be destroyed individually. Carpine also stressed the need for unified leadership, as no fragmented force could hope to stand against the Mongols. Another critical strategy he proposed was exploiting the divisions between the Mongols and the peoples they ruled. He believed that if these oppressed populations were liberated, they could become powerful allies in the struggle against Mongol domination. This perspective highlighted the importance of unity in building an effective defense against the threat from the east. Unfortunately, Carpine's reports and recommendations were not enough to convince European kingdoms to unite. When the Prince of Galicia-Volhynia, encouraged by Hungary and the Pope, declared independence from the Mongols, he received no real support. Poland found itself in a similar position. During the 1260 Mongol invasion led by Burundai, Poland suffered immense devastation, worse than during the first wave of Mongol attacks. With no external assistance, the Polish were left to resist alone. The battles were primarily sieges, and in nearly every case, the Mongols quickly overran Polish defenses. After the defenders drove them back, the Mongols withdrew with plunder and prisoners, free to ravage the countryside in Bulgaria. Prince Nogai's forces raided the region almost annually during the 1270s. It wasn't until 1283 that Nogai's army, supported by a Byzantine ally, suffered a significant defeat at the hands of the Serbs during a failed crossing of the Drim River. Later, Nogai and Prince Talabuga launched a major attack on the Kingdom of Hungary in 1285. The Mongols followed a familiar playbook, dividing their forces into two main groups. Nogai advanced through Transylvania, while Talabuga pushed through Transcarpathia and Moravia. They even sent a smaller detachment directly into central Hungary, retracing the path of Kaidan from the first invasion. Their strategy relied heavily on speed and surprise. This was the same method they had used in the invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire under Genghis Khan, when the Mongol army split into smaller units advancing along multiple routes. The tactic gave the illusion of a much larger force and overwhelmed the Khwarezmians, who could not predict where the next attack would strike. Similarly, in their campaigns against the Song Dynasty, the Mongols used rivers as fast transport routes, allowing them to move quickly and catch the Song forces off guard. They also relied on a comprehensive intelligence network, gathering critical information about enemy weaknesses. This enabled them to strike with precision, ensuring dominance across southern China. Now, in 1285, they invaded Hungary during winter, hoping to catch King Ladislaus and the Hungarians completely off guard. By moving swiftly, they wanted to prevent him from assembling a large enough army to fight one decisive battle. The Mongols specialized in breaking down their enemies piece by piece. This time, the Mongols had fewer distractions. There were no civil wars within the empire and no major campaigns elsewhere, which meant Nogai could bring a massive army, likely between 30,000 and 50,000 men. This force included cavalry units provided by vassal states, such as the Ruthenian princes, strengthening the Mongol ranks. Mongol soldiers were exceptionally well equipped and highly mobile. They wore chainmail or scale armor, lightweight yet protective, paired with steel helmets designed to shield the face and neck without sacrificing agility. Renowned for their short bows, the Mongols could shoot with deadly accuracy from horseback, giving them a decisive battlefield edge. Alongside bows, they carried curved sabers, spears, maces, and axes for close combat and breaking through enemy armor. On the Hungarian side, an estimated 30,000 men stood ready in defense. Local contingents, including Saxons, Vlachs, and Sekeles, joined the resistance. United in purpose, these regional troops played a crucial role in slowing the Mongol advance. Yet, as soon as Talabuga led the main Mongol force into northern Hungary, problems mounted. The Carpathian Mountains battered them with heavy snow, turning the march into a nightmare. Logistical breakdowns and severe food shortages had already taken their toll, with soldiers dying in large numbers even before the battles began. But this was no accident. The Hungarians had prepared well. After the devastating defeat of 1241, they had learned from experience. As Napoleon once warned, "Never fight the same enemy too often, or you'll teach them all your tricks." That's exactly what happened. The Hungarians played it smart, evacuating villages, fortifying castles, and carrying their supplies and livestock with them. The Mongols were left with nothing to loot. Meanwhile, advances in agriculture, such as the heavy plow, had boosted food production, ensuring that the Hungarians remained well supplied and ready for a prolonged fight. Conditions grew so dire for the invaders that desperation began to spread throughout the Mongol ranks. For the Mongols, the campaign was a disaster. Galician sources claimed that thousands died during the march, with some even resorting to cannibalism. When Talabuga's forces attacked Pest, they found the town deserted, its inhabitants safely sheltered in nearby castles. Meanwhile, Queen Elizabeth's entourage wasn't idle. From the walls of Buda, they launched a daring counterattack, a bold move for defenders under siege. The Mongols, Masters of mobile warfare and archery usually excelled at hit-and-run tactics, using light cavalry to harass and exhaust their enemies. Hungarian knights, however, were trained for heavy close combat fighting. Normally, the Mongols dictated the battlefield to their advantage, but this time they found themselves trapped in hostile territory. Unable to overcome stone castles and running low on food, they were forced into a weakened state, closely watched by Hungarian scouts. The Hungarians devised a clever plan: infiltrate the Mongol ranks to gather intelligence. Scouts disguised themselves in traditional Mongol clothing, kaftans, curved nomadic shoes, and distinctive headgear like the deal hat. Armed with curved bows and sabers, they were visually indistinguishable from real Mongol warriors. Blending seamlessly, these scouts collected vital information that allowed King Laszlo's forces to time their charge perfectly. When battle came, the Mongols were caught off guard. Their light cavalry tactics failed against heavily armored Hungarian knights, and they could not break through their ranks. The situation echoed the 10th century, when nomadic Hungarian raiders were finally crushed by Otto the Great at Augsburg in 955. In the same way, Talabuga's army was decisively beaten. Realizing his campaign was collapsing, Talabuga ordered a retreat, but the retreat through the Carpathians turned catastrophic. The Sekeli ambushed the Mongols with swift cavalry strikes, the same tactics the Mongols themselves had used so often. The ambush was devastating, wiping out most of Talabuga's forces. Chroniclers claim he returned with nothing but his wife and a single horse. Perhaps an exaggeration, but a sign of just how disastrous the retreat was. Meanwhile, Nogai, another Mongol commander, continued pillaging in Transylvania until spring 1286, sacking towns like Regan, Brasov, and Bistrita. But like Talabuga, he failed against Hungary's stone fortresses. Without proper siege equipment, his raids stalled. King Laszlo IV rallied his forces, but by the time he arrived, local troops, mainly Saxons, Vlachs, and Sekeli under Roland Borsa, had already crushed Nogai's army. Laszlo only had to deal with scattered survivors. By the end, both Talabuga and Nogai were decisively defeated and forced to retreat, their campaigns against Hungary ending in failure. And that was it for the Mongols in Hungary. The second invasion ended in complete failure, leaving the Mongols licking their wounds and Hungary stronger than ever. After Talabuga and Nogai were forced to retreat from Hungary, it seemed for a brief moment that the Mongol threat in Central Europe had been successfully contained. However, appearances were deceiving. The Mongols, ever persistent, were not ready to abandon their ambitions in the region. In 1287, Nogai and Talabuga shifted their focus to Poland, launching a third invasion. This campaign, however, proved far less successful than their earlier endeavors. While Mongol forces managed to pillage the countryside, their attempts to capture Poland's fortified cities were met with stiff resistance. The city walls held firm, and the Mongols were unable to penetrate these urban strongholds. Despite the devastation in rural areas, there was a glimmer of hope for those resisting the Mongol incursions. Several Hungarian lords, emboldened by their recent success in repelling the Mongols from their own lands, journeyed to Poland to provide military aid. This cooperation marked one of the rare instances of a semi-unified front against the Mongols in the region. Hungary and Poland, sharing the burden of defense, stood together against the looming threat of Mongol dominance. This invasion marked the last significant Mongol attempt to expand westward into Europe. Although the Golden Horde continued to conduct raids into European territories well into the 14th century, these were on a far smaller scale and lacked the strategic weight of their earlier campaigns. By the mid-13th century, the Mongols' grip on Central and Eastern Europe had begun to falter. Internal conflicts, coupled with external pressures, weakened their control. European powers, sensing an opportunity, began to push back. The Kingdom of Georgia, under the leadership of King George V the Brilliant, reclaimed its sovereignty, restoring Georgian dominance over its lands. In a bold move, they even seized the empire of Trebizond from Mongol hands. Meanwhile, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania exploited the Golden Horde's internal strife to expand its territory. Lithuanian forces triumphed at the Battle of Blue Waters, securing lands like the Duchy of Kiev and pushing as far as the Dniester River. However, their advance was eventually halted after their defeat at the Battle of the Vorskla River. The Grand Duchy of Moscow also began to assert itself, reclaiming many of the Rus' territories under Mongol control. This reclamation laid the foundation for the emergence of the Tsardom of Russia, a new power that would rise from the remnants of Mongol domination. Hungary, too, took the initiative. In 1345, Hungarian forces invaded Mongol-held territories, capturing the lands that would later be known as Moldavia. Around this time, even Western European powers began encountering the Mongols in the territories they once controlled. A striking example was the siege of Kaffa in Crimea. Mongol forces under Jani Beg laid siege to the city, but their efforts were thwarted when a Genoese relief force arrived. The Genoese inflicted a crushing defeat on the Mongols, killing 15,000 troops and destroying their siege equipment. The following year, the Genoese blockaded Mongol ports in the region, forcing Jani Beg to negotiate. By 1347, the Genoese had successfully re-established their colony in Tana, on the Sea of Azov. The death of Oz Beg Khan marked the beginning of a tumultuous period for the Golden Horde. The devastation of the Black Death swept through the region, compounded by ecological disasters and economic hardships. These challenges, coupled with successive civil wars, plunged the Horde into chaos from 1360 to 1380. Although Toktamish temporarily stabilized the situation, his efforts were undone by the arrival of a formidable adversary, Timur, the Great Emir. Timur's invasion wreaked havoc on the already fragile Golden Horde, further destabilizing its power. During this period of Mongol disarray, the rulers of Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania seized the moment to press their own claims on Mongol territory. Lithuanian forces in particular captured Kiev and advanced all the way to the Black Sea, marking a significant shift in the balance of power in Eastern Europe. Finally, the story of Europe's struggle against the Mongols is a reminder of how opportunities and fragmented efforts can shape the course of history. The series of Mongol invasions in Europe is going to be released soon. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us create more amazing content for you. Let's aim for 1,000 likes in the first 24 hours. Every single like counts. And if you have a favorite battle or historical event you'd love to see featured, drop your suggestions in the comments below. I can't wait to hear from you. See you in the next video, and take care.